Just 25 days ago, two gunmen, armed with high-powered weapons, went to Bondi Beach on the first night of Hanukkah and they murdered 15 innocent people. They wounded dozens more.
Last week, Anthony Albanese announced a Royal Commission, something he'd spent nearly a month arguing against.
I've taken the time to reflect, to meet with leaders in the Jewish community, and most importantly, I've met with many of the families of victims and survivors of that horrific attack.
Now, former High Court Justice Virginia Bell will lead an inquiry into the Bondi terror attack and the rise of antisemitism in Australia. It's a major shift for the Prime Minister, one that raises questions about how he makes decisions and how he handles pressure. I'm Daniel James, and you're listening to 7am. Today, Press Gallery journalist Karen Middleton on the scope of the Royal Commission, the political fallout of the PM's reversal, and the risk that it all could lead to deeper division. It's Monday, January 12. Karen, good to see you again. Let's start with the scope of the Royal Commission. What will it look like and when will it report back?
Well, it's broad, Daniel. It's very broad. It's going to look at anti-Semitism in Australia and its root causes in institutions and society, so broaden that as widely as you like.
This Royal Commission will cover four key areas as set out in the terms of reference that I am releasing today. 1, tackling anti-Semitism by investigating the nature and prevalence of anti-Semitism, examining its key drivers in Australia, including religious and ideologically motivated extremism and radicalisation.
It's going to look into institutions, the government, how much resourcing there's been for agencies and law enforcement and security. Including
through improvements to guidance and training within law enforcement, border control, immigration and security agencies to respond to anti-Semitic conduct.
And it's going to see if decisions that were made, see if anything more is needed to prevent these kinds of things happening again.
And 4, make any other recommendations arising out of the inquiry for strengthening social cohesion in Australia and countering the spread of ideological and religiously motivated extremism in Australia.
What the Prime Minister has done is effectively combined this Federal Royal Commission with the agency examination that he had already announced. So that was the one that former ASIO Chief Dennis Richardson was doing. He will now work with the new Commissioner, Virginia Bell, on her commission. So he will report his part and they will decide how to divvy those responsibilities up by April 30 of this year. That's considered as an interim report of the Commission, and then she will have to hand down her final report by the 14th of December this year, which will be the first anniversary of the Bondi attacks.
And as you said, it'll be run by former Justice Virginia Bell. What considerations would the government have made when picking her as Commissioner?
Well, she's done a review for them before. Remember when they took office and it was discovered that former Prime Minister Scott Morrison had held multiple ministries. Anthony Albanese, as Prime Minister, appointed Virginia Bell to examine how that all came about, and she handed that report to the government in 2022.
Virginia Bell is an eminent individual with an extensive and diverse legal career as a community lawyer, a barrister, a law reform commissioner, a Supreme Court, as well as Court of Appeal judge, before assuming her high office in the High Court of Australia.
So they have selected her, despite some criticisms from within sections of the Jewish community, including Josh Frydenberg, the former Treasurer, had suggested that she would not be the best choice.
You would have thought after 2.5 years of this unbelievably bad behaviour we've seen in our country towards the Jewish community that the Prime Minister would have got the support of the Jewish leadership for his choice before putting that name out into the public realm. Unfortunately, that didn't happen.
But I think there's now support that the Royal Commission has been called.
A Royal Commission was not the way Anthony Albanese wanted to handle this. In the week after the attack, he announced a more targeted response, as you've referred to, an independent review of federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies. So where does that announcement leave that plan specifically?
Well, that is really what's a bit unclear now, that because he's combined these two reviews, the Commissioner and Dennis Richardson will have to work out how the labour is divided up. It's possible they would do something like have Dennis Richardson focus on the operational side of security and law enforcement agencies in relation specifically to the Bondi attack, what resources they had, what recommendations they made that were or were not acted upon. Virginia Bell could do the broader questions of whether the law as it stands has been adequate to prevent anti-Semitic attacks or anti-Semitism spreading. And this commission can also look at border protection policies, immigration policies, the whole of society. So they do have to divide those responsibilities up, and they will need Dennis Richardson's remit to be reasonably focused in order for him to get his report in by April.
The Prime Minister has previously argued that a Royal Commission would platform the worst of anti-Semitism. What has he said now about how he's going to stop that from happening?
Well, he has issued instructions to Virginia Bell to ensure that the Royal Commission does certain things but also doesn't do certain things. Now, it's not allowed to impede the progress of criminal proceedings against the man that has been accused of these murders, bearing in mind that one of the alleged terrorists was killed during the exchange of fire with police on the 14th of December last year. They don't want her to do anything or conduct an inquiry that will impede national security, and they don't want it to impede social cohesion. So making sure that this does not become a platform for further prejudicial comments, anti-Semitic or otherwise, that divides the community rather than bringing it together. Because the theme the Prime Minister has really emphasised has been unity. And when he announced his reversal of his decision on a Royal Commission, one thing he said was that it had become clear to him in the 3.5 weeks since the attacks that saying no to a Royal Commission was not going to achieve unity. And that was a big part of the reason he changed his mind.
The Special Envoy for Anti-Semitism, Gillian Segal, stood with the Prime Minister as he announced the Royal Commission. She said that he had listened to Jewish Australians and had made the right call. How significant was that in your view?
I think that was very significant. We'll remember that in the first couple of weeks after the Bondi attacks, the government finally made its formal response to Gillian Segal's report earlier in the year, and there was criticism of the government for taking too long to do that. Gillian Segal stood beside the Prime Minister at Parliament House and made that announcement and welcomed the response, although she did emphasise she thought it should have come sooner. She has done that again with the announcement of the Royal Commission.
The Jewish community and the broader Australian community have been calling for a process of this sort of authority, and it's very important that those calls have been heard.
So she is playing a representative role, I guess, for the Jewish community in some respects. She was endorsed by the Jewish community leadership broadly as the special envoy when she was chosen. And so she's really, I think, trying to play a mediating role in that sense. And her standing beside the Prime Minister is saying, yes, we wanted a Royal Commission. Yes, we had to push hard for it. It's taken maybe too long. We would have liked it to happen faster and in a different way. But we're glad this decision has been made and we're going to support this process. So I think it was very important that she was there.
Coming up, what Albanese's reversal tells us about his leadership. Karen, this announcement comes after almost a month of pressure from some in the media, from Jewish groups, the opposition, sporting greats and others, I suppose. So is this an admission of failure by the Prime Minister?
Well, it's a good question. The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, doesn't like to admit failure or apologise or anything like that, broadly speaking, and he is certainly not admitting failure. But you have to say that when an attack occurs that kills 15 people, then there has been a failure of government at every level and agencies to keep people safe, which is the fundamental job of all governments. The question is whether that was a preventable failure or not. And then there's been the debate about whether there's been a subsequent political failure in the way the Prime Minister has chosen to respond in the 3.5 weeks since. There are certainly some critics, and particularly in the opposition, who say it's taken far too long, and opposition leader Susan Lee is saying that it's a sign of weak leadership.
Australians deserve honesty, they deserve answers, they deserve leadership.
But he is saying it's a sign that he has listened, that he has acted, and he's in fact now saying that this Royal Commission was called in record time, if you look at history and how long Royal Commissions have taken to be mobilised. So he's trying to suggest that he has been spending this time thinking carefully and drafting these terms of reference and planning. I mean, the truth is they were saying very strenuously they didn't want to have one and they weren't going to have one right up until just a week or two ago. So the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
Is there a risk that by not holding his original position and being willing to hold his ground, that he's actually going to end up hurting himself politically even more?
Well, I think this whole process has hurt him politically. It's very difficult to try and extricate the politics and the party politics from the substance of the concerns around the attacks at Bondi, because there's been a degree of partisanship in responses to this whole issue going back to certainly to the October 7 attacks of 2023. And so it's all bound up together, and I think it's become very hard to disentangle. But the Prime Minister has been the focus of severe criticism for the way he has responded to this attack. Certainly the Jewish community were very forceful in their expression of view that the government didn't listen to them when they said they were scared of this kind of thing occurring in the wake of October 7.
To have to think that here in Sydney, Australia, I have to have security full-time at my synagogue. My children have to go to school where they're told not to wear their uniforms outside. And now 12 of our best are gone down. So, I mean, there are no words.
So it has certainly left him politically diminished. If you look back to just May of last year, where he had won this incredible victory with his Labor colleagues, a huge majority in the House of Representatives, unexpectedly large, and was seen as unassailable. I'm not sure that you could reflect on his position as being anywhere near as secure as it was.
Karen, setting aside the politics of how we've ended up here, we now have a Royal Commission. So what will that mean in practical terms? What can the public expect to find out from this process?
Well, that's the big question. The Commission's got to work out the structure. I think there's an expectation of public hearings. I think there would be an outcry if there weren't public hearings. So she has to work out the balance between public hearings and in-camera or private hearings. There may be a case for private hearings where security agencies and secret information and operational details are concerned. So we should expect that there'll be some of that. But I think the emphasis in the terms of reference is that this gets underway very quickly and is as expeditious as possible. So she's got to find a structure that is going to be efficient, but also draw as much information out of people as possible and satisfy the public expectation of public accountability. Because I think that was where the government went wrong. There was a sense that it had not properly responded to the demands for public accountability and facts to be laid on the table and the personal experience of the Jewish community. So she's got, it's a tough job, because part of this is going to be the importance of the process of allowing Jewish Australians to tell their stories, and other Australians who may have been subjected to prejudicial treatment in the same context, and also extract information about this particular attack and the circumstances around this attack more broadly that are creating this problem in Australia.
And finally, Karen, I guess the question that a lot of people are really concerned about at the moment is, what is the risk that this Royal Commission will actually deepen divisions further?
Well, I think that's always a risk. This issue has a lot of emotion with it. There are a lot of people in Australia with deep personal ties to both Israel and Gaza and the Palestinian territories more broadly. And so this has long been a very difficult issue for a lot of people in Australia. Then we have the October 7, 2023 attacks, which have escalated all of that feeling. And then the international politics that have gone with that, with the attacks themselves and then the Israeli response. And we've heard calls from the government to try and separate feelings about the Israeli government and its actions and ordinary Jewish Australians and Palestinian Australians and other Australians of Muslim background, to try and separate all of that. So there is a huge risk that this becomes a fulcrum for everybody's prejudices. And so the Royal Commissioner has a challenge to try and traverse that in a way that this becomes a positive experience, that people telling their stories enables the rest of the country to understand things from a point of view that perhaps they don't experience in their own life personally. And we know that's how prejudice works. It's really often only seen by the person experiencing it. So we want that process, but we don't want it to further entrench the divisions and hatreds and have the opposite effect of intent.
Karen, thanks so much for speaking with us.
Thanks, Daniel.
Also in the news, Victoria Police have confirmed the death of one person as a result of the Longwood bushfire in central Victoria. There are still several bushfires out of control across the state, and hundreds of buildings have been destroyed. Authorities say bushfires could burn for weeks, and a state of emergency remains in place. And the United States has told American citizens to leave Venezuela, amid reports armed militia are targeting them. The State Department issued a security alert on Saturday, describing reports of armed pro-regime collectivos setting up roadblocks and searching cars for evidence of links to America. The warning said Americans should remain vigilant and exercise caution while travelling via road and leave the country as soon as possible. I'm Daniel James, this is 7am. Thanks for listening.